Alright, let's move on to Section 3, Charts and Common Chart Settings. As you can see, FindBI offers a wide variety of chart types. You might be curious about what kind of chart effects we can create with these numerous chart types. Here, we've provided a summary dashboard of the chart components. You can click the link to view it. Once you click the link, you'll be redirected here. We showcase some of the basic chart types and some special chart types in FindBI. While the special charts might not be used frequently, they are helpful in specific scenarios. Each chart type is labeled with its suitable use case and what situations it's best for. If you're interested in learning how to create a specific chart, you can save the dashboard as a subject. After previewing it, you'll be directly taken to the editing interface. You can then choose the chart creation method you'd like to learn and start editing. If the dashboard editing interface doesn't pop up, you can also find it in the My Analysis section and click on Edit. Since there are many types of charts, in this lesson, we will start with the 3 basic and most commonly used charts, helping you understand the principles behind FindBI's chart creation. The first basic chart we're going to discuss is the column chart. In the previous lesson, we talked about tables. Here, we've added a new component. We'll drag in commodity category and sales as before, but this time we'll switch to a column chart. Now, we have the chart in a column format. In the previous lesson, we learned about sorting. Now, I'll sort the data in descending order based on sales. The setup for dimensions and indicators in this chart is similar to what we saw in the table. However, there's one key difference. Notice that there's an axis added here. This is because in a table, there's no concept of an axis. A table is simply a grid. But in a chart, we have a 2-dimensional structure, with both a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. Here, the category axis refers to the axis where our dimensions are located. You might wonder why this isn't called the horizontal axis. Well, if I switch the chart type, for example to a horizontal bar chart, you'll see that the commodity categories have moved to the vertical axis, but it's still called the category axis because dimensions are used to classify and group the data, while the indicator, sales in this case, shows the values. This distinction reinforces our understanding of dimensions and indicators, which we introduced in the first section. Here we have a bar chart. By switching the horizontal axis, we're essentially displaying a special type of bar chart. Let's switch it back. Now, let's take a look at our category axis. This mainly involves settings for the axis where our dimensions are located. For example, we can show the axis title, the axis labels, and customize how the labels are displayed, as well as their style. Now, you can see the axis labels, which represent the category axis. Next, we have the value axis. The settings for the value axis are slightly more complex than for the category axis because there's a concept of values here. In addition to the axis labels, we also have the display range, as the value axis represents numerical data. This range can be set to default or customized, where we can adjust the minimum, maximum, and intervals between values. To adjust axis settings, remember that you click the small triangle under the axis you want to modify. It's easier to remember this than trying to differentiate between horizontal and vertical axes, because sometimes they can switch places. This is where we differ from Excel, where you can simply double-click to modify. Here, you'll modify settings through the drop-down button of the respective field. Next, let's discuss how to adjust basic chart properties and how dragging different fields will affect changes in the chart. I'll demonstrate now. At this moment, no fields have been dragged in. If I change the color without any fields, it affects all the bars. However, if I drag a commodity category, a dimension field, into the chart, the bars will have different colors based on the category. If I drag an indicator field, like sales, into the chart, the color of the bars will change based on the sales value. Higher sales will result in a darker color. Similarly, if I drag this field to the size section, the size of the bars will adjust according to the sales values. If I don't drag any field and simply adjust the size, I can modify the bar width and the corner radius of the bars. The principle for color and size is, when no fields are dragged, the entire chart will change. If I drag a dimension field, the colors or sizes will vary according to different classifications. If I drag a numeric field, the color or size will change according to the numerical values. Now, let's move on to the labels. Right now, the bars don't display any values. You can only see the values by hovering over the bars. To make the values visible directly, you can drag the sales field into the label section. Now, the sales values will be displayed on each bar. You can also adjust the number format of the values or even drag the dimension field into the labels. You can add multiple fields to the labels, and you can adjust the content format, label position, and display settings such as showing the maximum, minimum, or all values. Finally, we have the granularity. This field can be used in the pie chart, which I'll explain later. Simply put, granularity refers to a finer level of detail. For example, if I want to see the sales of each commodity within a commodity category, I can drag in the product name. As a result, you'll see the bars cut based on the product names within each commodity category, almost like cutting a cake. That's a basic explanation of how to adjust chart properties. Let's take a look at the different types of column charts. The one we just demonstrated is the most basic column chart. If you hover over it, you'll see it's called a partitioned column chart. When will a chart be partitioned? When we have a dimension and an indicator, we can display the data with one bar for each category. But if we drag in both sales and cost amounts, the chart will partition them. The more indicators we drag in, the more segments will appear within each bar. This is the partitioned column chart. Now, let's switch to the stacked column chart. You'll see that here, with one dimension and two indicators, the two indicators were previously displayed side by side. Now, they're stacked on top of each other. This means that the sales value is equal to the combined total of cost and gross profits, allowing us to see both the cost and gross profits within the sales bar. For a small expansion, besides the stacked configuration, we can also stack a single indicator by itself. For example, if we drag sales into the chart and want to stack it, we can drag product name into it. This way, we can see the sales per product within each category, with the bars stacked by product name. Understanding how to configure chart properties comes from understanding what we want to express with each bar and how that affects the overall chart. This way, we don't need to memorize how to drag fields around, just think about what you want the chart to show, and the configurations will make sense. Now, let's move to the multi-series column chart. When we drag multiple indicators, they are displayed side by side. But in this chart, the dimensions remain the same, while the indicators are combined in one bar, without stacking. For advanced users, I'll provide a small tip. Some people have asked how to configure a column chart where we have one indicator, like sales, and want gross profits and cost to stack within the same bar, while keeping the sales value separate. To do this, we can turn on stacking for the indicators we want to stack. By toggling the stacking option, you'll see that gross profits and cost are stacked, and their total equals sales. This shows that FindBI's charts are highly customizable, and you can design your charts exactly as you need, according to your idea. Next, we have the contrast bar chart, which allows us to compare two indicators under the same dimension, and shows the relative size of each. For example, we can compare gross margin and cost by switching to this chart type. Finally, there are two special features to discuss: Special Display and Analysis Line. First, Special Display. This feature allows you to add annotations to your bars, so that even without hovering, the values will always be visible. For instance, if you want to highlight the maximum value of gross profits, it can be displayed directly on the chart. Second, flashing animation. This effect makes the bars flash, drawing attention to the values that meet certain criteria, helping you focus on the most important data. Finally, image fill. Instead of a solid color, you can use images or custom patterns to fill the bars, giving them a unique visual style. These are just a few of the flexible and advanced options available for configuring bar charts. As you work more with Find BI, you'll discover that chart customization can be done entirely according to your needs and creativity. Then, let's talk about the analysis line. There are two common types, the cordon and the trend line. First, cordon. This is a horizontal line, and it is displayed according to your specific requirements. It's usually used to indicate a threshold or limit that you want to emphasize on your chart. Second, trend line. The trend line helps show the change in an indicator over time. When the x-axis represents time, you can use a trend line to observe how a particular product's sales performance evolves over time. For example, you can fit the trend line using different methods, and in this case, I've added a dashed line to represent it. Lastly, let's introduce some styles for the components. These involve some concepts like axes, lines, and grids. For example, you can configure the appearance of axis lines, grid lines, and partition lines. You can decide whether to show them, how thick the lines should be, and the line styles, all of which can be set here. Additionally, if you want to hide the legend of the chart, you can easily do that. You can control whether to display it, choose its font style, and adjust its position as well. All of these settings are flexible and can be customized. Moreover, you can adjust the background of the entire component, the background of the title, and the overall background of the component. All these settings allow you to fine-tune the visual appearance of your chart according to your preferences. Alright, let's move on to discussing the line chart. Let's take this example for illustration. We are now displaying gross profit and cost for different months and years. When displaying trends like this, the best choice is often a line chart because a line chart naturally reflects the trend of change and development over time. In this case, we selected a line chart. Earlier, we used a partitioned column chart, and now we have switched to a partitioned line chart, which you can see immediately. The configuration is also updated accordingly. Now, let's take a look at the properties of this line chart. One key feature here is the connection line. This line controls the style of the curve. Right now, we are using a straight line, but you can change it to a curved line, which would have no sharp angles or vertical segments. Additionally, when choosing between a straight or curved line, you can customize the line style, such as whether it's solid or dashed. You can also choose whether to include markers on the line, and whether these markers are solid, hollow, or styled differently. All of these settings can be configured as needed. In terms of the line itself, it corresponds to the line width setting, similar to how the bar width works for bar charts. You can also switch to multiple series in the chart. What does multiple series mean? It means that within the same chart, different lines represent different indicators or dimensions. For example, in this case, different lines represent different indicators. The color of the line indicates the indicator, and the label shows the name of the indicator, such as gross profits and cost. If we want to display the trend of different commodity categories under the cost indicator, you can adjust the chart to compare these categories over time. By dragging the dimensions, you can visualize the comparison. This is an example of comparing two indicators within one dimension. In the next part, we're going to look at the area chart. We'll turn off the opacity for this one. Now, let's take a look at the pie chart. After selecting the pie chart, you'll notice that once we drag the data in, it will automatically generate the chart. Let's give it a try and see how it works. If we drag the commodity category in sales, we can observe how the sales is distributed across different commodity categories. Once we drag it in, the pie chart is automatically generated. Right? Now, you may notice that the chart properties here are a bit different from the first two charts. The axis is empty because a pie chart is actually a concept based on area. Different segments occupy different areas based on their size. The size of each segment is determined by its angle and radius. If the radius is fixed, the angle will determine the size of the segment. Therefore, the different sales will result in different segment sizes or angles. If we add a horizontal axis, we'll see the proportion for each year-month combination. The radius can be adjusted, and we can modify the inner radius and the overall radius. You can also choose whether it is solid or hollow. As for the angle, as we mentioned earlier, it affects the segment size. Regarding the labels, by default, a numerical label is generated. If you want to display the percentage, you can adjust the number format or use quick calculation to show the proportion in percentage form. Now, let's dive into the granularity of the pie chart. Earlier, we used commodity category. Under each commodity category, we also have product names. If we drag the product name into the chart, you'll see that the pie chart is divided into finer sections. For example, the larger section represents snacks, and within snacks, the different product names contribute to the overall sales amount of the snacks. This is the granular level of the data. We can also look at the multi-level pie chart. Earlier, we separated the segments of the pie chart. Now, this display shows an additional layer around the outer edge. The display form is made up of this layer, with the colors representing different categories, and the labels are configured in the same way as before. Next, let me explain two more things. One is the map, and the other is our combination chart, which is a custom chart. For the map, we will focus on 2 points. The first thing to note when working with maps is that the data must be related to geographic locations, such as provinces or cities. After selecting the appropriate geographic data, like the province, we need to convert the geographic role. For example, if we select province as the geographic role, we match the data and click OK. Then, it will generate the longitude and latitude. Similarly, for cities, we must also drag the province's longitude and latitude data to switch to a map. Longitude corresponds to the horizontal axis, and latitude corresponds to the vertical axis. On the map, we can think of the longitude as running horizontally and the latitude as running vertically. Once the map is generated, you can customize colors, labels, and other settings just like in other charts. For example, we can use different colors to represent sales amounts, with darker colors indicating higher sales. We can also use points and other formats to present the data interactively. If we want to customize the map, we can make changes without clicking by using a rectangular block. This will create a different effect. This is the charm of customizing maps, where we have the freedom to make different modifications and creative adjustments. Next, let's talk about the custom chart. The custom chart is something we commonly use in analysis. However, in the basic charts available, there isn't a specific option for a custom chart. For example, let me drag in a case from our first lesson, which shows gross profit and its month-over-month growth rate. If I select the bar chart here, you can see that although there are chart options, it's impossible to click and switch the chart type because the chart type has already been fixed as a column chart. We can't change it. If we want to customize the chart according to our needs, we need to switch it to a custom chart. Once we switch to a custom chart, you'll see that it's now possible to select and modify it. For example, we can change one of the series to a line chart, allowing us to freely customize the display. After selecting the custom chart, you'll notice it is still segmented. We can aggregate the indicators on the vertical axis and display them in the same area. However, there is still an issue. The values are very different, one being in the millions and the other below 1. To fix this, we need to adjust the axis, which is very important. I can choose a different scale for one of the axes, which allows us to display both series together. Additionally, as part of our example, we can also configure colors for the fields. For instance, I can copy the month-over-month growth rate field and drag it over to assign different colors for different growth rates. We can even set ranges for these colors. For example, we could use a gradient color scheme and customize it. The default setting is for 5 color intervals, but we can adjust it to 2. Our dividing line will be set to 0, meaning values greater than 0 will display in green and values less than 0 will display in red. Due to time constraints, we won't demonstrate every single chart type, but we are showing the more common or important ones. Throughout the session, the goal is for everyone to understand the principles of chart configuration. I've heard many of you asking for more practical cases, especially those more relevant to your own analysis scenarios. If that's the case, you can click to view more scenarios in Find BI, which is specifically designed based on real business use cases. You can save the scenarios and review them as needed.